Animal sacrifice isn't typically the first thing that comes to mind when one eats meat, but that is essentially what farmed meat is. While you might not be the one holding the meat cleaver, you are still the one holding the dollar and the fork. Intensive animal farming practices need to change. My education on this issue is a little more extensive than only having watched a couple documentaries on Netflix. I have conducted formal research, and through scholarly articles, I have found unbiased, factual information that sheds light on this grim business. My moral disposition and conscience have been convincing me to fight for farm animal rights for years, but until recently I haven't been educated enough to hold my own in an argument. Meat consumption is part of most people's lives. If you have a soft spot for animals, you might want to consider how animals raised for food have a higher degree of intelligence and sentience than you think, and you might also want to consider how good you can feel if you adopt a plant-based diet. The farming practices that are exhibited by large-scale farm operations are inherently wrong. We will discuss how symbiotic relationships are important for maintaining the natural order of things. Discussing how these efficient business practices are economically advantageous to the individual, the country, and the world, all at the cost of animal welfare, is important to do as well. Finally, we will look at the steps people have taken to instill change. To draw from Jessica Perry's research from her article, The Paradox of My Work, in which she interprets Temple Grandin's world-renowned research, humans have developed a separation from the symbiotic relationship we had with animals raised for food. It is not mutually beneficial anymore. Sacrifice, symbiosis, human ignorance, and education are important elements to consider when discussing this topic. Carey and Grandin's research touches on the taboo concept of sacrifice and how it used to be regarded as a spiritual act that held a higher degree of reverence for the creature being killed for human benefit. Once upon a time, humans and animals were part of a more mutually beneficial or symbiotic food chain. Humans would provide animals with a life very comparable to, if not exactly what their natural lives would have been. Herding sheep, cattle drives, that sort of thing. Similarly, hunting and gathering was a very symbiotic way of life. It is natural to hunt something as a means for survival, not sport. Taking a glimpse at modern farming, the relationship has become extremely one-sided. While it is true that we give the animals life, it is not a life any creature deserves or wants. Historically, humans said a prayer or did some sort of ritual that honored the animal. Now picture a modern slaughterhouse, where workers have to disconnect themselves entirely so they can be mentally prepared to do one of the worst jobs I can imagine. The life of a worker in the industry may be hard, but change needs to start not with them, but with the business owners and legislators who are capable of making substantial changes. From this sophisticated article, Paradox of My Work, I gained a new perspective on human ignorance and perception of our superiority to animals. This philosophical debate will undoubtedly prove to be one of the greatest moral conflicts we will have to have with ourselves as a species. Education is the most effective way to change any problem. Creating ways for the public to become informed on this important issue is the best thing an individual can do to implement significant change. Shifting gears, let's look at some details and simple reasons this business has become too big to fail. In the shocking and gruesome article In the Belly of the Beast by Paul Solotaroff, he sheds light on exactly what goes on in your average industrial animal farm. Cows, chickens, pigs, and turkeys are the most frequently harmed animals that are inhumanely treated in their lives and improperly slaughtered in the process of their deaths. The evidence supporting the position that almost all farm animals are raised with cruelty come from sources within the farms. There have been many activists that become undercover employees so they can whistleblow on how these places are run. Pigs are kept in crates so small that they can't turn around. They are separated from their young immediately after they're born, live in their own waste, and fed drugs that make them grow unnaturally large. Chickens are also confined to very tight living spaces. less than a square foot to roost and lay their eggs, forced to live in and breathe their own feces, and fed growth hormones, antibiotics, and genetically engineered feed. It's a very similar story for turkeys as well. Milk cows, just like pigs, are raised in concrete slabs that are barely bigger than their bodies, never brought outside, have shortened lives by 15 years, and they're also milked so much that they become sick and their bones become too brittle to support their large bodies. It's natural for us to choose not to think how the meat comes to be on the shelf. This disassociation is an underlying cause as to why the public remains in the dark and why these industries continue to thrive. The reasons behind animal cruelty are easy to understand. Free market capitalism, consumer demand, and economic advantage all play a role in driving this unnatural food production system. In layman's terms, it is easy to see the ripple effect of demand. The consumer, the supplier, the farmer, the corporation, the federal government, the national economy, and the world economy are all contributors of the issue and drive the industry. According to the World Bank and the UN, livestock contributes $1.3 trillion to the global economy annually. Therefore, it is no wonder many people think of an animal's life as a dollar sign. It just begs to wonder why we wouldn't want to honor them and treat them well for supporting us in significant ways such as this. Gaining multiple perspectives from different types of sources will help us see how widespread the support for animal farming reform really is. Through an interview with environmental science graduate student Kara Henderlight, I gained some more knowledge about the issue, as well as some much needed hope for change in the industry. To paraphrase her responses to my questions, one thing to consider about the issue is the unintended human consequences of this loosely regulated industry. Antibiotic resistance is becoming increasingly more common, and environmental disasters are also becoming a big concern. Just look at what happened in South Carolina. The hurricane, total disaster. While improvements that have been implemented have only been on the state level and not federally changed, they are all steps in the right direction. The size of chicken cages increased, there are now significantly better statutes for the transportation of farm animals, and there have been modifications to state ag laws to protect whistleblowers. The shift in momentum in animal rights is better human health standards are both parts of the solution. In short, our relationship with food animals is evolving right alongside us, and if we don't start considering their well-being, we'll lose sight of our humanity. There will always be those who believe we are superior to animals and have a right to eat them. It is less about the meat itself and more about the way it is produced and processed. With absolute economic advantage being the driving force behind factory farming, it is hard to imagine that change is possible. Therefore, it is up to the individual to change the way they view meat and change their eating habits to limit their own meat consumption. The inhumane exploitation of farm animals is not often considered by those who are in a position to make substantial changes to the industry. However, if enough individuals become aware of the cruelty experienced by factory farmed animals, we might at least be able to instill meaningful changes into our meat production processes.